You're listening to a message from Gateway Church Geelong. We hope it blesses you. For more information about Gateway, visit gc.org.au.
Well, this morning as we come around the Word, you may have seen, if you're active on Facebook, you would have seen this morning that this morning's message is actually about navigating change. And it's something that's so very important for each and every single one of us, learning how to navigate change well. It's one of those important life skills that if you don't put into place, life can seem very, very, very difficult. If you're coming up against change, you don't have a skill to actually navigate that well. I believe, to be honest, it's an imperative for all of us to learn to deal with change better. An absolute imperative. It's a key to help us growing in both our spiritual walk and also our practical walk through life as well, and in relationship with those around us. Today I want to actually start off by looking at Joshua 1 verse 9. And as I was looking at Joshua 1 verse 9 again, I was just like, just when you thought that we've looked at it so many times that scripture couldn't give anything else, all of a sudden it comes and the revelation of God is shone upon it again. Joshua 1 verse 9, for those of you who aren't familiar yet, this is my command. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Wherever you go. And I want us just to focus on the last three words for just this little moment this morning. Wherever you go. Wherever you go, the command that is given by God for us is to be strong and courageous, not be afraid, not be discouraged, because the Lord is with you wherever you go. And if we look at that, wherever you go, when you go somewhere new, it's inherent that there's a new thing coming when you go somewhere. You're stepping out into a new thing. You're changing from a place or more commonly changing to a new place when you go somewhere. And the thing that I guess is connected to wherever you go is, if I'm going from here to here, I've changed position. If I move over to this side of the stage, I've gone somewhere new, God's gone with me, but I've changed position, I've changed place. And I want us to actually have a look at that today, that God says to us, his command to us to be strong and courageous, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged, for the Lord is with you wherever you go. Whenever you go to a new position, to a new place, whenever you're changing from one place to the next, God is with you wherever you go. Wherever you go. When you change from thinking from one way to a new way, God is with you wherever you go. It may be in your workplace that there's a new procedure that's put into place, a new procedure that's put into motion. He's with you wherever you go through your changes. It may be in your family that a common practice that has been a common practice for a long time can no longer sustain the new place that God wants to take your family. He's changing something within your family, and he wants to actually take you to that new place, but it's like that common practice, it's not going to work anymore. He needs you to move with it. Wherever he takes you, he's with you. You can be assured of that. You know, God may have been doing something new in your family. It was okay for the past, but it's not okay for the new. There's a new family model that he wants to bring into place, a new practice, or maybe it's a new thing that he breathes into your character that he needs to implement that can actually sustain you through the change that he's bringing for you. It may be that God is renewing something within you, within your mind, within your strength. God's strength and his power wants to be shone upon you as he renews that for you today. So I want you to be reminded today that he has empowered you through Christ. Christ is in you. And that his strength and courage resides in you. So often we look at change and it's like, I don't know if I can go through this change because I don't feel like within myself, I have the ability to actually walk through this. The truth is today that in your own strength and your own power, that is true. You don't have the ability to do it. But Christ within you, his strength, the power of the Holy Spirit empowering you, He gives you the power to walk through that journey, to walk through that. You know, when the natural feelings of fear and discouragement may come, be reminded He is with you. As He makes changes, as you make changes within you, both spiritually, emotionally, and physical changes that you put into place, He is with you wherever you go on the changes and life's journey. I have a couple of specific steps for us today that we're going to begin to look at when it comes to navigating change. And these specific steps are going to encourage you, but they're also going to be things that are actually going to help you put into place specific things that change the way that you walk. Can I encourage you, if you don't have a pen and paper or a phone to take messages on today, grab one quickly because you need to write this stuff down. You need, if you're going to take this away and implement it during the week, if you're going to put things in place, if you don't have some form of like, I've got it written down or I've got it on my phone, I can go back to it, you will forget it within the next 15 minutes. Maybe 5 if you're like a fish. Just like, you got to write this stuff down. And the first one I have for you this morning is this. Write this down. Allow God's narrative to be the narrative for change in your life. Allow God's narrative to be the narrative for change in your life. Now, for those of us who don't know what the word narrative means, I had to look it up too. No, I didn't really. The word narrative means an account of your story. Allow God's narrative, God's story for your life, and now allow that to be the narrative for change in your life. Not the way things have happened within your family, not the way your boss says it is in the workplace. Allow God's narrative for your life. Allow God's story, God's plan, God's destiny for your life. Let that be the controlling factor, the designating factor in the narrative for your life. You know, the reality is that God has a plan. God has a direction. God has a perfect narrative, a perfect story for your walk. But you have to allow that to be the case. See, when we allow fear, self-ambition, ill feeling towards others, jealousy, and just plain old self to get in the way of God's story for our life, it changes the narrative from His direction and will to our direction and will. The ability to navigate change well has to be in line with His will for your life, not with where you want it to go. So the reality is when we side with our will, when we side with our direction, generally this narrative, this story will leave us torn up on the inside and leave us feeling like we're always in the wrong position. Has anyone ever felt like that before? I know that I have definitely felt like that before, where it's just like, I've got this ambition, I'm chasing, I want to do this, I want to be the best at this, but always left feeling like just something's missing. If we're torn up on the inside. Why? Because I've been doing it in my own strength, within my own power, and I haven't really been paying attention to what God's narrative is, what God's story is, what my destiny is, what my will is within His will. See, if this is you, even in the smallest of ways today, I encourage you, tune in. Tune in right now. Allow God to help your life story be narrated by His perfect will for you today. One of the first things that we need to do, and I encourage you, write this down when we talk about navigating change well, is this: change the way you think about change. Change the way that you think about change. One of the first things that we need to do. Now, the reality is that people love change. You think about it. People love to change their hairstyle. They love to change their hair color. They love to change their hair length. We change and we redo our kitchens and our bathrooms, and we get new cars and our clothing styles. What happened in the 90s? I don't even know, but we loved it, right? In hindsight. We change our jobs, we change our suburbs, we even go as far as Googling and researching change because we're like, I just got to get ready for that next thing, that next change in my life. I'm going to be prepared and studied for it. I'm not going to get caught out. I'm going to be all over this thing. We change ourselves with personal life coaches and personal trainers to change our bodies. Just buy a bike, everything will be fine. Isn't that right, Phil? Just buy a bike. In all reality, we don't hate change. There are areas of our life where we love change. We love it. It's like, we don't even dislike it. We love it. Except for when it's somebody else telling us that we have to change. I take it back. Don't buy a bike. Do whatever you want. It's fine. For reverse psychology, you'll end up buying a bike. It's fine. Except for when someone's telling us you have to change. That's when it's like, I hate change. When someone tells us that we have to change, all of a sudden it's like this thing stands up inside of us like, I hate change. I hate it. No, I don't want to know about it. Forget it. I heard this quote a couple of weeks ago from Pastor Craig Groeschel. And it says this. It'll be up on the screen for you. There are only 2 times people change. When they have to and when they want to. When they have to and when they want to. See, for all of us, the reality is as people, we don't hate change, but usually what we do dislike is when we find it super annoying is when our spouse or our boss or our pastor comes with change and it isn't the change that you dislike, it's what you're actually reacting to is the fact that you're being told change needs to come. When you've been told that change needs to come. When we have to and when we want to. Navigating change well, it's really important that we figure out whereabouts we actually sit in that quote. You want to navigate change well in your life. Where do you sit in that quote? See, what your spouse or your boss or your pastor or somebody else in your life may have actually missed out telling you before the big you need to change speech was that they perhaps didn't let you know why. Why is it that change needs to come? The reality is for all of us that when we're going through specific seasons in our life where it's like we know that change needs to come, but if someone doesn't actually explain us through it, walk us through it, if they can tell us the why, write this down. It's important to help people see why change is necessary. It's important to help people see. It's important for you to understand, help yourself see why change is necessary. Allow yourself or allow the people around you to understand and know the why. Why do we have to change right now? Why is it that I have to bring this change within my character? Why is it you're telling me that I've got issues, but tell me why I need to change this thing? What's it gonna help in the long run? How's it gonna help my family? How's it gonna help me in the workplace? How's it gonna help me in my dealings with the people that God has called me to actually encourage in this life? See, this has actually been something that I've been personally committing to. Why do we need to move on this change, or why do we need to change in this area? And I've been sort of been understanding the why and trying to sort of interpret that to the people around me so that people just aren't holding on going, I'm just following blindly by faith right now and because I like you, not because I like the change that's coming. Just trying to communicate that well to the people around us. And most people, if presented with a great why, It's like, this is why. Not because it's a flippant choice that we've made today, but this is where we're going, and we know that if we don't change this, that it's going to be really hard for us to actually get there. Most people, most of us, if we're presented with a great why, will eventually begin to see the value in the changes coming, and will eventually begin to see that there's a reward in it for them if they actually move with the change, because they begin to understand how this affects us. You know, something that we've started as a church is, as much as possible, allowing our departments and our teams to actually help create the change. You know, team members within different departments are on framework teams and structural teams, and they're helping us create processes within the church that actually structurally support the church to allow their teams to flourish, allow their teams to grow, and allow us as a church to love people the way that God has actually called us to love people within our city. If you're someone who struggles with change, particularly when you're being told that it's time to change, the best way to help process and progress through change is this: to be involved as closely as you can, to be part of a team that helps create change. Why do I say that? Because the reality is, when someone comes with change, what is our most common thing that we do when someone comes with change that we don't like? Whoa, just gotta take a step back and process this for a moment. In the time it takes for you to process it, maybe it's 2 days, maybe it's 2 months. 2 months of life has passed you by, and you're like, okay, I've dealt with the change that you want to initiate. So you come back close. You're like, okay, I'm ready to deal with that change. I've got it sorted out. Man, we've had 3 changes since you've been gone. Stay close. Stay close to it. Be in friendship and be in relationship with people that you're going through change with. Don't pull back. Don't isolate. Things keep moving. You've stopped to deal with this one thing, but things keep moving. You need to stay close. Allow people next to you and alongside of you to encourage you through that. They don't expect you to get it straight away. But when you do have an issue, it's like, I'm really struggling with why we're doing this. I don't quite understand it. Can you tell me again? Navigating change well keeps you close in relationship to the people around you. Separating yourself and dwelling on everything that you are losing. This isn't one of my main points, but if you want to write it down, separating yourself and dwelling on everything that you are losing will bring fear. It will bring discouragement. It will bring the opposite of God's narrative for your life. Separating yourself away from things will bring the opposite of God's narrative. Connect yourself to others during change. They will infuse you with hope. Be like a tea bag. They will infuse you with hope. They will infuse you with an outlook of hope and encouragement. You may even begin to add creativity to the change that's actually happening around you. Navigating change well. You know, often I think that we're afraid to tell people that we want to change or need to change because there's this deep-seated concern that people will complain or bring a negative response. The truth of the matter is this, that for each and every single one of us, when someone comes with, we need to change, the truth of the matter is this, that deep inside of us, there is an element where it's like, oh, I'm going to complain just because I don't like it right now. It's our natural starting place. Unless you're one of those super overly positive people who just like see the best in everything. Rub off on us. Rub off on us. You know, the truth of the matter is this, that there are always going to be people who complain. You try and bring change within your family, there's always going to be your kids. It's like, why can't I watch TV now? Why can't I be on my iPad forever? Why can't I do this in the workplace? There's always going to be someone who doesn't like the fact that they can't do something that they used to do, and you will always get complaints. Navigating change well. It's important to know how to deal with people when they actually come with complaints or start talking loudly about your changes. If you want to navigate change in your life better, help the people around you know why we're changing or why we're bringing change. Allow them to be part of the change. And remember this, people will always complain. It sounds really negative, doesn't it? People will always complain. It's our natural start position. But I tell you the truth, if we can choose to navigate well, letting people know the why, letting people be involved in the change, even in the midst of people's complaining, you may sway them to believe the why and bring them to a place where they support the change. If you can navigate it well and put key things in place, you may sway them to actually, I believe the why, and I'm committed to actually help bring the change. I want to include the following statement for all of us this morning to help us understand seasons of change. When you enter change and people don't like it, you may lose some friends and colleagues. You may lose some people who are really close to you. And I want to put this out this morning. That's okay. That's okay. Prepare yourself for loss. It's okay. Prepare yourself for loss. Prepare yourself to even maybe for a short time to prepare to walk through a grief and a loss of people that you thought would be with you through thick and thin, even when you go through change. Now, do we want to lose those people? No. We don't want to lose our friends and our colleagues and those close to us. But be prepared that it may happen, even when you are navigating change well. And I want to caption it with this morning. Be prepared for short-term loss. Why do I say short-term loss this morning? I do believe that if you navigate change well, explain the why, letting people be part of the change or helping to actually bring change, that even if they bail on you for a short term, that as they process it for a short term, they'll be drawn back into the change because you navigated it well with them. Don't freak out when you go to make a change in your workplace or you go to make a change in your friendship group because you're like, we used to do this thing, but I feel God's speaking to me. It's not okay to do that anymore. So you go to make the change and you let people know why and you allow them to be part of creating a new way of doing things within your family or your friendship group. And they're just like, be prepared for that and be okay with that. If you're following God's narrative for your life, you got to stay true to that. Don't be so scared about making change because you're scared of losing people in your life. Don't let that fear or discouragement kick in. So some keys to navigating change when people complain and want to leave your side in the midst of change. Remind yourself that change is inevitable, but process is optional. Remind yourself that change is inevitable, but progress is optional. I'd write that down if I was you. Remind yourself that change is inevitable, but progress is optional. Change is always going to happen. You can allow change to happen around you and feel like everyone's just leaving you for dead. Or you can get in close to it, tuck in with somebody else and actually start walking through that change. Start walking through that change. So the 4 things that we need to activate in our life to navigate change well. I'll leave them up there for a while so you can actually write them down if you need to. Help people see, allow ourselves to see and know why change is necessary. Allow people around you or allow yourself to help create and make the change. Be prepared that there will be people who complain. Maybe it could be you. Ouchie. Maybe it could be you. Maybe it could be me. Number 4, be prepared for short-term loss before a longer-term gain. So I want to encourage you today that, I'm going to say it. Just because there's people around you who sound really, really loud and complain doesn't mean that they're the most. It doesn't mean that they're the biggest group. And you need to remind yourself of that. Often it's the smallest group who can bring a huge, huge voice. We see it in politics all the time these days. These small groups shouting really, really loud and everyone's scared. Everyone's scared to upset the smallest group. Don't let that be part of your narrative and your story for life. Don't be so scared by what the smallest group's going to say in your life that it stops you from progressing and moving forward. I also want to say to you this today. Please, this morning, don't allow reaction to fill your heart, even with any of the things we're talking about. Don't allow that to happen. You're in control of that. You can allow those things to, it's like, oh, this is really frustrating me. The fact that he's talking, it's like, don't allow that. Don't allow that. That's your choice. Navigate change well. Navigate other people's opinions well. It's something that you can do. The power of God is within you to actually help you do that. See, know today that learning to navigate change, and I was thinking about this yesterday, that navigating change, it's a challenge. In fact, change is in challenge. If you look at the actual word challenge, it's like change is in it. Whenever there's change, there's always going to be a challenge that comes with it. It's a natural response in us to feel the push of change. But it doesn't have to be your resting place in the challenge. There is freedom for you, but don't get stuck there. Don't get resistant there. You know, the days of, I say this in the nicest way possible, the days of crying really loud to get the attention of mum or dad, the days of crying really loud to get the attention of your teacher or your boss or your pastor have to pass. Allow yourself to grow and navigate change and challenge well. Allow it to happen within your life. See, our heart is, as a church, you know, change is inevitable, progress is optional. Our heart as a church is that we want to actually practice change and practice navigating change really, really well. We're committed to walking out the practice when it comes to change. And we're going to do it as a church. We're committed to it. We're going to do it because we choose to, not because we're forced to. Not because we're in a place where it's like things have like gotten so out of hand that we're now forced to change. No, we want to be on the front foot, walking God's narrative for our church, and we're going to choose to actually do that. We're going to do our best to choose to change, and we're going to do our best not to be in a place where it's like we simply have to because we've got no choice. There's so many accounts in the Bible when we start to talk about change and navigating change well. You know, we've been focusing a little bit on the people of Israel because we've been focusing on Joshua about being strong and courageous. And the people of Israel had to navigate some extreme and significant change after the Egypt exodus, as they actually got out of Egypt, and the change of wandering in the wilderness, and the change of trusting and then not trusting, and then trusting and not trusting. We could go on. You know, they were delivered from slavery, and they were delivered from the hard work of other rulers that had a plan for them. They were set free in the midst of some crazy circumstances. They had hard work, and a way was cleared for them because of God's power and God's miracle intervening power for their life. Yet in the midst of change, they found themselves longing for the things of the past. They found themselves longing for that moment where it's like, we didn't have to worry about anything. In fact, we had that great soup. How many hundreds of years in slavery? And yet because change was too challenging, all they could think about was that we had that soup, that watery, disgusting soup that was no good for us, that didn't sustain us very well. God's providing for us. He's separated rivers. He's given us food. Everything's taken care of, but all we can focus on, this is too much of a challenge. We need some watery soup. Focusing on the past because the challenge becomes too hard. It was undermining the clear direction, the clear narrative that God actually had for them, bringing them to their promised land. You know, they looked at the leaders that they had and they're like, these same leaders like that brought us through the miracles, that just began not trusting that God was actually directing the leaders where they were meant to be taking them. They saw these leaders perform miracles in the name and the power of God. They saw them delivered out of slavery, exodus from Egypt. And before we land today, I just want us to have a look at some individuals within the Bible who navigated change and challenge really, really well. Some of them did it really, really well at the end. Some of them in the middle patch, maybe they struggled just that little bit. And we're gonna have a look at that today. Let's look at this snapshot of some people this morning. Peter. Where do we start with Peter? Separated from Christ, a fisherman, becomes a follower of Christ, becomes chosen of Christ upon this rock. Oh, hang on, denier of Christ. Oh, hang on, facilitator of revival. Challenge and change. I did miss a bit where he cut someone's ear off, didn't I? Yep. Challenge and change. There's going to be pressure that comes upon our lives, and sometimes it's going to be hard to actually respond in the right way. Sometimes we're going to lash out and do things maybe as we used to do in the past, but God's encouraging us to step forward through the challenge into his change and fulfill the narrative that he actually has for our lives. Let's look at one more. Paul, religious scholar, best of the best. Not only separated from Christ, slayer of all who followed Christ. Blinded by encounter with God, the same God that he thought that he was in service to by killing followers. An encounter that opens his eyes with God's vision for humanity, becomes a facilitator of conversation and revelation of how people were meant to actually understand the resurrection power of God. You know, post-Acts, we look at his empowerment that he's actually released into the church. And as he reflects on Jesus and he reflects on the resurrection power and how the church is meant to be functional as a church. See, God activated in his life, pushing through the change. The reality is, the challenge that he had, been struck down on the road, he would have been like, my life's over. Everything that I've stood for is a lie. I'm just going to crawl away and not going to front up to see anybody ever again. Challenge and change. The reality is, it's because of the Apostle Paul that the way we do things even today as a church, his influence, his ability to push through the challenge and navigate the change well has actually released us to actually do things functionally and well. Here's some things for you to write down before we finish this morning. What change have you got to navigate at the moment? For you as an individual, what change do you have to navigate at the moment? How are you going to, or how are you learning to transition through change? How are you learning to, or how are you going to lead well through change? How are you going to love well through change? Are you supporting people around you well through change? Are you growing through change? Are you stretching and enlarging through change? I've focused on the positives there. I don't want to focus on the negatives today. You know what the negatives are. You know what the opposites of those are. But I want to encourage you today to actually, how are you doing these things? How are you going through the challenge so that these changes begin to rub off onto people well around you? Now, this morning, I put it out to you this morning. Are you living for your own survival? Are you living for yourself? Maybe even giving grief to Christ followers. Ouch. It's okay. Apostle Paul did it. What's your story now? See, I look at those, that's the story of your past. What's your story now? What's your narrative? What's the will of God? What's the destiny for your life now? More importantly today, what is your story to be? What's God's narrative? What's God's story for your life? How will you navigate the change that needs to come about in your life? How will you navigate to choose change rather than live in resentment to change? Maybe that's a better question. How will you navigate and choose change rather than live in resentment to the change that chose you or was thrust upon you? So you've been chosen by God to bring the greatest life-changing message of all to all. Can I say that again today? You're like, what's the purpose for my life? What am I meant to do in this world? What have I been chosen for? You've been chosen by God to bring the greatest life-changing message of all to all. The only message that brings humanity its only hope. That's what you've been chosen to do. That's the change that you've been chosen to bring to planet Earth, to humanity. The only message that brings humanity its only hope. That's what you've actually been chosen to do. A message that reveals God's love and the extent that he went to change the story of your life and the lives that you're connected to. He sent Jesus to take all of our sins on the cross, all the bad parts of us. Christ conquering sin, conquering death. He's made a way for us to position ourselves in eternity to change from the way that we were into who he's destined us to be.